Our Keystone species and community structure journey begins with wondering, why is the world green? This led to the discovery of the green world hypothesis, stating that the world is green because herbivores are kept in check with bottom-up and top-down controls. This was the first time predators were considered to have a role in regulating ecosystems. This theory was tested by Robert Payne, who removed sea stars, the top predator in an intertidal ecosystem, and discovered that the resulting ecosystem was monospecific with only mussels present. This showed how a single species can influence an ecosystem's species richness directly through predation, in this case consuming mussels, and indirectly through competition, like preventing the competitively dominant mussels from outcompeting inferior species. The predator removed in this experiment, sea stars, were discovered to be keystone species of the ecosystem because their presence increased richness, functional diversity, and trophic complexity, and their absence decreased richness and complexity. So what is a keystone species? It is a species that has a disproportionately large effect on its environment relative to its abundance, biomass, or productivity, and the removal of this species will cause the ecosystem, or arch, to collapse. The abundance of keystone species is important because at intermediate abundances they only eat competitively dominant prey, which would thrive without them, but at high abundances they also eat inferior prey and drive them to extinction. Another great example of a keystone species is an otter in a kelp forest. With otters present, there is low urchin biomass, low grazing intensity, and high kelp biomass, but without otters controlling urchin populations, there's high urchin biomass, high grazing intensity, and low kelp biomass, which leads to an urchin barren. Keystone species are not the only controls on an ecosystem. Ecosystem engineers, like beavers, are capable of causing a complete shift in architecture of an ecosystem, but unlike keystone species, the ecosystem would not collapse without them. Foundation species are also able to control an ecosystem by providing physical structure in their environment, via their dominance in biomass, abundance, or productivity. Examples of this include sea ice algae, which creates a unique structure of ice and alters entire trophic cascades in the Arctic, and trees, which serve as both a foundation species and an ecosystem engineer. Both of these examples are primary producers. Primary production is incredibly important to an ecosystem because it provides energy to higher trophic levels via trophic cascades, and its decline could have negative impacts on top predators by limiting energy availability. Animals, like these top predators, are good indicators of how an ecosystem is doing as a whole. Iconic animals are used from a conservation messaging standpoint to relate environmental issues to the common person. There are also used as sentinels to take a pulse check on how the ecosystem is doing. Animals used as sentinels ideally have moderate tolerance, sensitivity, and endurance, which can give us early warning signs that things are going wrong before we are able to sense it on our own. Examples of this include canaries in coal mines sensing unsafe air, dogs and cats sensing household toxins, and cows sensing anthrax. Another example is marine mammals, which are used as sentinels of human health because they have long lifespans, reside near coasts, feed at high trophic levels, have unique fat stores, and are charismatic to the common person. How will we know that these animals are giving us early warning signs if we don't know what their normal is? We need to understand the natural components of an ecosystem to be able to recognize what's unnatural when something goes wrong. DDT, for example, was not known to be harmful until someone noticed that eagle populations were lower than usual due to the chemical thinning eggshells. This observation eventually led to the banning of the chemical and inspired Rachel Carson to write Silent Spring. Other unnatural events like bioaccumulation can be recognized if the effects of the pollutant are known. These examples show that in order to fix the world, we need to know what's wrong.